Trials of Osiris is thriving more than it ever has been in Destiny 2. And over the last 4 weekends, despite having more players go flawless than in the entire previous year, each weekend has been a completely different experience. From matchmaking changes to flawless pools to adding an objective to the game mode, Bungie seems to be using this season as a testing space before Witch Queen arrives in February of 2022. So with there being a possibility for some continued inconsistencies across Trials this season, let's talk about some of the things that are consistent. Today, I want to go over the top 5 primary weapons to use in Trials of Osiris. This top 5 list is constructed for both PC and console players alike. Now, I have 2 disclaimers before I get into this list. First, I'm letting you know right now that I'm going to cheat just a little bit with this list. There are some instances where I will be naming archetypes instead of individual weapons. And the reason for that is because they all essentially do the same thing as each other, even though they may have completely different roles. Secondly, Vex isn't going to be on this list. Why? Because we all know it's crazy good. I don't need to convince you or regurgitate information that you already know about Vex because yes, it is probably the best primary in the game right now. So to not waste your time, I am keeping Vex off this list, not because it's not a top 5 weapon, but because we already know that it is. Okay, with that out of the way, in no particular order, let's start with the first weapons on today's list, Darkest Before and Grid Skipper. Darkest Before and Grid Skipper are both rapid fire frame pulse rifles in the energy weapon slot. You can get Darkest Before from defeating the final boss in the Prophecy dungeon, and Grid Skipper from focusing Umbral engrams at the engram decoder in the Helm. Darkest Before and Grid Skipper have an optimal time to kill of 0.80 seconds and a body shot time to kill of 1.40 seconds. There's a couple reasons why these 2 weapons are extremely viable right now in Trials. First, their range is ideal for the current slate of maps in Destiny 2. They can be used in close range maps as well as medium sightline maps. The second reason is because of their time to kill and their crit percentage required to achieve that time to kill. These rapid frame pulses have a TTK of 0.80 seconds, which is about average right now for primaries in PvP. But the crit percentage is one of the better crit percentages at 78%. This means that only 78% of your shots need to be crits in order to achieve that optimal TTK of 0.80 seconds. And if you've been following the formula for which weapons become meta weapons, solid time to kills with forgiving crit percentages equal high ease of use weapons. Take 120 hand cannons for example. Even though their time to kill was 1 second, their crit percentage was only at 33%, meaning you only needed to hit 1 crit for certain resilience tiers to achieve that time to kill, which was quite forgiving. So with these weapons having a low crit percentage on top of being able to quickly fire the gun, your missed shots aren't as crucial compared to using a slower firing weapon. As far as rolls go, on Darkest Before in the barrel slot, I'm looking for anything that increases my effective range. High caliber rounds in the next slot, and then either tunnel vision, slide shot, or quick draw in the first perk slot, and then full auto or rampage in the last slot. I could maybe be convinced to stick with elemental capacitor depending on the subclass you run, and maybe even wellspring, but those are probably my B tier options if I had a choice. For Grid Skipper, the first 2 slots remain unchanged, ranged perks and high caliber rounds. And in the first perk slot, honestly, any of them would be okay to use. Firmly Planted and Slideways may be like a half tier lower than the other ones, but they're still really solid perks. My personal favorites for this column are Moving Target and Tunnel Vision. In the final column, really any of them except for Thresh and Adrenaline Junkie. I know some people are able to find ways to incorporate these 2 perks effectively into a build, but if we're strictly talking about Trials, these 2 perks are kinda meh. I'd much rather have a perk like Snapshot, which can be used every time I use the gun, or something like Multi-Kill Clip, High Impact Reserves, or Frenzy to get that damage increase. My personal favorites for this column are Snapshot and Multi-Kill Clip. One final note on these 2 has to do with their recoil. Darkest Before has a base recoil of 64, which is extremely close to having a perfectly vertical recoil. I probably wouldn't use a counterbalance mod on it, as it would change the direction of your recoil from slightly to the right to slightly to the left. That's just my preference. Try it out and see which one is more manageable for you though. However, Grid Skipper does have that perfect recoil direction of 55. So if you end up getting Arrowhead Break, Chambered Compensator, or Extended Barrel, My suggestion would be extended barrel because then you get that extra range buff. Do not use a counterbalance mod on Grid Skipper, as it will change the recoil from vertical to pulling harshly to the left. For that reason, I prefer Grid Skipper to Darkest Before, but clearly a lot of people like Darkest Before much more based on how many kills it's gotten in the last few weeks of Trials. Overall, these are solid dueling weapons for Trials. While we're riding the pulse rifle train, let's talk about the next weapon on today's list, the Messenger. The Messenger is a high impact pulse rifle that can be earned from playing Trials of Osiris. It has an optimal time to kill of 0.67 seconds, a body shot time to kill of 1.20 seconds, and a crit percentage of 83%. The Messenger has some of the beefiest numbers on our list today, and it certainly shows in PvP. With both the optimal and body shot TTK being faster than the average, this weapon is coupled with a few other unique qualities that really put it over the top. One of the reasons it's so widely used is because of its weapon stats. It currently has the highest base range stat and stability stat of any high impact pulse rifle in the game. Add on top of that a clean reticle and a recoil direction that can become vertical if you use a counterbalance mod. The Messenger is one of the higher ease of use weapons in the game, and we haven't even talked about its perks yet. The Messenger is unique in that it is the only non-sunset weapon in the game that can roll with the perk Desperado, which says that reloading after a precision final blow increases this weapon's fire rate. With Desperado active, the rate of fire gets pushed to 600 rounds per minute, which is faster than the rapid frame pulse rifles, and it also changes the optimal TTK to 0.47 seconds and the body shot TTK to 1.0 seconds. It's quite literally a game-changing weapon perk, and like I said, it's only available on one non-sunset weapon, the Messenger. Messenger can also roll with Kill Clip, which is obviously a top tier perk if you're able to proc it within Trials. I briefly mentioned it before, but the Messenger has a recoil direction of 70, which is actually good because no matter what barrel perk you get, even if it increases the recoil direction, you can still throw a counterbalance mod on it and it will give us that perfect recoil direction. As far as the other perks go in the barrel slot, I would honestly go for more stability and handling perks. The base range on Messenger is already very good, and the likelihood that you'll need to utilize the entirety of its effective range is very low with the current maps that we have. So my suggestion would be something like Small Bore or Fluted Barrel. Obviously, any of the recoil direction perks or range increasing perks would be fine as well. In the mag slot, we're going with high caliber rounds to create that extra flinch with every shot we take. In the first perk slot, any of them would actually be very good. It just all depends on how you plan on using it in your build. But my personal favorites are Rapid Hit, Killing Wind, Moving Target, and Outlaw. In the final column, there's two S tier perks in my opinion, and that's Desperado and Kill Clip. Otherwise, it's a pretty massive drop off after those two. I do want to quickly give a shout out to another high impact pulse rifle that actually got reintroduced into the loot pool this season, and that's the Legal Action 2. It too is also in the kinetic slot and can roll with some decent perk options. Heating Up and Rampage is likely the go-to for this one, though actually getting the weapon to drop in the first place is going to be the barrier as it only drops from the world loot pool. The really nice thing about Legal Action is that its effective range is almost a full 10 meters more than the Messenger's, and that's because the base zoom is set to 22, giving Legal Action a base effective range of almost 45 meters. We aren't able to roll high caliber rounds on it, but accurized rounds, steady rounds, and tactical mag are all solid options. Overall, Messenger is an incredibly solid option for any loadout. Just keep in mind that because it's a slow firing weapon, the more you miss your shots, the longer your time to kill becomes, which could result in more deaths for you. However, in my opinion, the reward highly outweighs that risk. The next weapon to make the top 5 may surprise some PC folks, but console players will certainly confirm its legitimacy. And this weapon is none other than the exotic hand cannon, Crimson. Crimson didn't seem to get the memo that all the other hand cannons got, because instead of the normal single shot firing mode that all other hand cannons have, Crimson fires in a 3-round burst, similar to a pulse rifle. Crimson has the trait Cruel Remedy, which states that kills with this weapon heal the wielder. Precision kills will also refill the magazine. And if you get the catalyst for Crimson, you will get a range increase of 18, which almost maxes out the range stat bar. One of the big reasons Crimson is so viable in PvP is because of that ease of use factor we talked about earlier. You can miss a couple crits with Crimson and still have a faster time to kill if you miss the same amount of shots with the regular 140 hand cannon. That's not to say it's better in all situations, because Crimson certainly has some drawbacks just like every other weapon on this list. But for those of you who aren't robots or snorting advanced GG, having a weapon which is as forgiving as Crimson is, it makes for a really great option in Trials. Another reason I like Crimson for Trials is for the healing we get after each kill with the weapon. In Trials, when staying alive is so much more important than getting a kill, having a perk that can immediately start your health regen after you come out on top after a gunfight can really sway the momentum of the game in your team's direction. There's so much to like about Crimson as a dueling weapon in Trials. Healing and reloading after a kill, a perfectly vertical recoil direction, a forgiving TTK. My only slight drawback is that if you do use Crimson, you're foregoing quite a bit of range for your primary weapon. If you want to be any kind of threat downrange whatsoever, you'll have to run a sniper or another primary with more range. However, there are certain Trials maps where you will be able to get away with running a close to mid-range loadout. Just something to keep in mind. Since this is likely going to be a longer video, here's a picture of my dog to help it make it seem not as long. He says that 1 like on this video equals 1 pet for him. He also says that if you subscribe, he gets to go to the pet store and pick out some new toys. His words, not mine. The next 2 weapons I just couldn't leave off the list today because they quite possibly could be the best dueling weapons in the game for Trials, but they each have their own lane in which they excel. I'm of course talking about the exotic 140 hand cannons Thorn and Ace of Spades. Anyone that has played Destiny for a significant amount of time likely already knows of these 2 fabled weapons. Thorn, dating back to Destiny 1, is known for its damage over time effect after each bullet that pierces its target. Ace of Spades is known, well, for Cade 6, but it's also known for having the perk Memento Mori, which is kinda like Kill Clip but on steroids and without a timer. The thing that makes Thorn so incredibly strong in Trials is that its damage over time effect can put an opposing player out of a fight for a much longer time than any other normal weapon can. I mean, you can shoot someone in the toe and it will activate that damage over time, preventing their health regen from starting. Those extra few seconds that it takes for your opponent to heal can be the catalyst for winning in a round. So Thorn makes the list today not because it's simply another 140 hand cannon, but because of its utility in creating unforgiving scenarios for your opponent. On the other hand, Ace does not have the same effect that Thorn does, but it does have its own unique way of being one of the best dueling hand cannons for Trials. Ace currently has the highest base range stat of any 140 hand cannon in the game, and it's not even close. Coupled with high caliber rounds and Memento Mori, you've got a weapon that performs well both before and after getting a kill. After getting a kill and reloading Ace, you've got those 6 Memento Mori shots that can just sit there for as long as you have Ace in your hands, which means that the threat of those 6 shots is just as potent as the shots are themselves. So either the person you just killed with Ace won't call out to their teammates that you have Memento Mori procced and you can just continue to take out the rest of the team, or they do call it out to their teammates and the threat of you having Mori forces them to play differently. Either way, your team has the leg up on the round. A weapon that has that type of influence on players undoubtedly makes it a top tier option for Trials. Now you might be wondering why I'm not throwing Hawkmoon or literally any other 140 hand cannon in on this list. The reason I didn't throw in other legendary 140 hand cannons is because Thorn and Ace each have their ways in which they are the absolute best in class, no matter what. Other legendary 140s are solid weapons, but none of them are the best at any one thing. Hawkmoon is a little different. Hawkmoon is a really good 140 hand cannon, but in my opinion, it's a really good 140 hand cannon for the 6v6 playlist. Hawkmoon's main draw is the paracausal shot, right? The potential to one-tap is something that no other weapon in the game can do. But how practical is it in a 3v3 Trials setting? How many times are you actually going to hit 7 crits in a row in order to one-tap someone? Once? Maybe twice in a card? Fewer players in the game equals fewer opportunities to activate what makes Hawkmoon a top-tier weapon. That's not to say you won't be successful using it because, like I've said, it's a solid 140 hand cannon. But if you're going to use an exotic hand cannon, use one that will have an impact on the outcome of rounds more frequently. Before we get into the last weapon, I do want to mention that I've got a few honorable mentions at the end, so make sure you look out for those. To round out our list, I want to talk about a decently new weapon, the Trials SMG, Shayura's Wrath. Shayura's Wrath is a 600 RPM precision frame SMG that is located in the energy slot. It has an optimal time to kill of 0.80 seconds and a body shot time to kill of 1.10 seconds. Shayura's makes the cut today for many different reasons. Right now, SMGs are in a very solid place in PvP. Their range is rivaling that of rapid frame auto rifles, their recoil is much easier to manage compared to what they used to be, and with the fast-paced meta we have, they certainly add to that increased dexterity. Shayura's is unique because it can obviously be obtained in an adept form, allowing for adept mods to be applied. If you're lucky enough, You can actually max out the range stat on this weapon with full bore and an adept range mod equipped. 99 if you get hammer forged rifling. Another one of the main draws to Shayura's is the possibility to roll kill clip, which turns it to a 0.60 second optimal TTK and a 0.90 body shot TTK. Almost any other perk in the first perk column is viable to pair with kill clip in the final column. Overall, SMGs have accounted for the third most primary kills in Trials for the first 3 weekends, and Shayura's likely played a large part in that total number. The other SMG to likely contribute to that is my first honorable mention, and I'm of course referring to the Multimach CCX. Multimach is a 900 RPM lightweight frame SMG that's unique for having the potential to roll with a scope that actually increases the zoom magnification, thus increasing its effective range. You can also roll the perk Iron Reach, since it is a weapon that is obtained from Iron Banner. This perk, on top of the increased zoom, will basically put the effective range on par with that of Shayura's. However, I gave the slight edge to Shayura's since there is now a more focused way of obtaining the weapon, and because there is the potential to get the adept version of it. Overall, Multimach is a solid weapon, but slightly limited on longer maps. No Time to Explain is the next honorable mention. Overall, it's a consistent weapon in PvP, and has some decent potential in Trials because of the little shooty buddy thing, and with how prominent Stag Lock seems to be in Trials right now. However, I didn't add it to the top 5 because I can essentially get the same results from the Messenger and Legal Action, and they won't take up my exotic slot. My last honorable mention is Dead Man's Tale. DMT cracked the top 10 most used weapons in Trials during week 2 on the map Distant Shore, but was nowhere to be found the other 2 weekends. My only issue with DMT is just that. It's likely going to be limited to specific maps. It's still a good option for mid to long range engagements, and it might be worth swapping to on bigger maps if needed. All in all, this is just a guide. You should obviously use whatever weapons fit your playstyle the best, but if you're looking for some weapons that might work slightly better in Trials, these are all a solid place to start. I made a video recently going over the simplest ways to succeed in Trials. That video should be showing up on your screen right now. Thanks for watching, and as always, we'll see ya.